Hey y'all, I am Nat McKellar Crosby, principal with the Herbal Apothecary, and this is the Herbal Apothecary podcast, where we talk about creating alternative systems to the current structures in place. Now, a little bit about the Herbal Apothecary is we provide holistic herbal remedies for common ailments with the hope to aid those who are often disregarded by our current medical system. And so, if you'd like to reach out to us, you can follow us on all social media at the Herbal Apothecary underscore, or you can go to our website, theherbalapothecary.net. All right, so typically we go into creating alternative structures, but today I want to hone in on the debate. A lot happened during that debate, and I think in order for us to be able to change systems, it's a great idea for us to understand the current systems in play, right? And so we're gonna dive into that pretty good. But first, I want to talk about our medicinal herb of the episode, and today we're going to talk about cloves. Cloves are a fantastic medicinal herb that has been used throughout time by various cultures in traditional Chinese medicine. Cloves are used for as a digestive aid and for pain relief. It is commonly known as a pain reliever for dental care throughout Africa, the Caribbean, and indigenous cultures. It is well known as an antimicrobial agent, and so able to help aid in ridding parasites and worms and things of that nature. And so cloves overall are a fantastic source, even just for headaches. Some clove tea could really go a long way. So if you haven't used cloves in a medicinal fashion, the Herbal Apothecary certainly recommends it. And so, well, at least we certainly recommend it. Um, and so, even for myself, I try to put cloves in my tea a few times a week just to help ward off any ailments I'd rather not have, you know. And so I hope that information helps you to do the same. All right. And so let's get into it. Right. This debate was filled with, I think it was actually filled with a lot of truth from both parties if you know how to listen for truth. Right. Um, we started off talking about the economy and the things that are happening in our world. Right, prices are too high. There's just a lot happening with the economy right now as we are still trying to gain our bearings and get interest rates in a reasonable place and all of that, right? And so I let's start off with what Kamala was talking about and her plan for the economy. So she's got 25K down payments for first time home buyers, 50K tax deductions for small business owners, which is unheard of, 6K in the child tax credit. So these are tangible policies that she's speaking about in order to benefit everyday folks, right? And so on the flip side of that plan, we have Trump's plan. And what he's talking about is increasing tariffs on imports, right? In order to lower prices. And so I wanted to start there, right? Because there's been a whole lot of information to come out that says that just simply isn't how tariffs work. Uh, Exporters who reach out to these importers for their goods, they actually pay the tariffs, and so they'll take the tariffs and then they add that to the cost of the goods, and so that cost is passed on to consumers. And so if we raise tariffs moving forward, exporters, the people who bring in those imports, they are simply going to do what they've done, and that's increase the cost for us. And so that's an important tidbit in Trump's so-called plan of increasing tariffs, because he is adamant that it will bring down our everyday costs. But it is true what Kamala said. about Goldman Sachs, about the Wharton School, about the 16 Nobel laureates, right? Who all say that that Trump's plan to increase tariffs will be disastrous and actually end up in about 20% increases in goods for us. So we're going to pay even more. And if we're paying more, that means that's going to be higher inflation and less money in our pockets, right? And so if we're listening in closely, he's saying that he has a plan, right? And his plan is to benefit someone other than us, the consumers, who have to pay for these goods, right? And so if we're listening with an ear of discernment, we can see who he truly wants to benefit, right? Because it won't be us if we're paying more prices. We're already paying extreme prices, and so getting into inflation, right, and the causes of inflation and what's happened around inflation. Honestly, it is a lot, right? We all know that it's been way too much, but inflation is a factor of many things, and the idea that we should just like blame the current administration for it isn't really a thought process that is fully realized, because we also have to include the fact that we just came off of a pandemic, a worldwide pandemic that shut down supply chains globally, right? And in that devastation of our supply chains, costs have increased. A great example of that is in rental cars and in our automobile industry, right? Rental companies during the pandemic decided to sell off their fleets because they thought it was going to last much longer than it did, lowering the amount of cars in the pool for people to rent. At the same time, automobile makers could not get access to the chips they needed to put in the cars to make new cars, right? And so now we have less of a supply of a good that we all use, right, for transportation. And so when the pandemic started to, the effects of the pandemic started to pull back, people started to go out more. People needed cars again. But now we don't have the same number of cars available, creating demand, increasing prices, right? And so it's not fully true to just blame a president for an economy after a global pandemic. You know what I mean? And then also, we know for a fact that corporate greed is involved in this, right? It came out months ago that the chicken corporations and manufacturers, that they're in cahoots to create a fake news story around diseased chickens that was taken far out of the realm of what was really happening, in order to increase the price of eggs to line their pockets. Like that's something that actually happened. And so with the mix of the supply chain disruption from the pandemic and corporate greed, plus we're in multiple wars, right? And so with the Ukraine-Russia war, that's affecting gas prices, oil, all types of goods that we normally import. Those things are at a much higher price because of the war, right? And so it's there are a lot of factors that include inflation, but none of them are either president just sitting behind their desk saying, let's let the prices go up, right? There are a lot of factors for inflation, and so I think that's important to include in our debate here, because we have one person saying that they had great inflation rates and all of that, but if we examine it, um, we only had those bottomed out rates because we were trying to maintain an economy that was in free fall. Like that's so it's a little disingenuous to say, oh, we had great interest rates when our economy had come to a complete halt. You know what I mean? That's not a legitimate talking point. And so I want you all to know that Trump is pulling our tail on that, because you can't say Biden is just or Kamala is just allowing inflation to take place when there are so many factors that lined up in order to increase prices. Now, I don't like it the same way y'all don't like it, right? And so that's why I believe that we need to create these alternative systems using tools like cooperation in order to create our own supply chains and our own means of economic stability for our local communities and for ourselves. Because we cannot depend on a global supply chain. We saw how that worked out. We can't be so dependent on a global supply chain, and we as black, POC, indigenous, brown people aren't readily do not have supply chains readily available to us. We have to go through a third party essentially, and so in creating new systems evolving around the global south, what does it look like for us to be able to set up supply chains within our country that keep our baseline secure and strong, and then being able to trade with other countries, excuse me, for their goods and services that we also need from them, right? So I think that's a great tidbit in inflation and what's being talked about during the debate, right? And another point that got brought up is this idea of the chips, right? Because the auto industry couldn't get the chips, and then they said that Trump uh, basically sold chips to China unknowingly, that they would use them in order to increase the power of their military. Well, whether he knew that or not, he might have knew it, because we talk about Trump here, and so he might have known that he was giving China these chips for that reason or not. But in doing so on the debate, he denies it and says that they got the chips from Taiwan, right? And the truth of that is that's just a misleading statement, right? Because we actually control the chips coming out of Taiwan. That's one of the reasons why China is willing to start a war with us over Taiwan, and we've sent naval ships out there to protect Taiwan from invasion, because we have an interest in the chips that they produce, and we basically run that chip distribution. And so it's disingenuous to say that he didn't do it and that they just simply got it from Taiwan, when we are certainly the intercessor of chips coming from Taiwan, right? And so it's just a lot of it's a lot of snaky stuff that we should be used to at this point. But it seems like some of us are still drinking the Kool-Aid. You know what I mean? And so just trying to debunk and fact check these claims, right? Because it's absolutely insane. And then we also so moving away from the economy, right? I know another great point that we want to talk about is Roe v. Wade, right? And so if you're listening to what Trump says, if you're listening to what he says that for 50 years they've been trying to do the work to return Roe v. Wade to the states, right? So who's been doing that work? Who's been doing that work, right? It is typically people who would like to remove rights from others, right? And so this is who he's speaking to. This is who has his ear, are the folks who were willing and adamant about overturning Roe v. Wade. These are the people that he serves, right? And so he's saying, well, they were fighting for this, and so I gave them what they wanted, right? And so how can he be for these people who have rolled back our rights that have been long standing, that we're all used to, right? He's rolled them back because he's working for a certain specific demographic, right? He works for the bigots. He works for the racists. He works for those who would like to subjugate and oppress, right? He works for religious zealots who want fundamental Christianity as the common law of the land, right? These are the people who has his ear. So when he's talking about who he's serving, he is serving that specific group, and he's claiming to have done so because he says, hey, this is what they wanted and I gave them what they wanted. Now everybody's happy, but clearly not everybody's happy, right? Like it was said on the debate, we didn't want that. No one wants that. They didn't sign up for that, right? But he is the person who put that into place, and so that's, the truth around that is that he serves a specific group that is hell bent on destroying people's everyday rights, and so from Roe v. Wade, one of Trump's biggest talking points, right, the thing he can't get out his mouth fast enough is immigration, right? He's always talking about immigration, but what is he really like? What is he really saying about immigration? Again, he's talking about the people he serves. And these people are bigots and racist. And so when he's talking about immigration, first, before I get into the bigotry and the racism, let's talk about how he orchestrated the failure of a border deal just so he could maintain the talking point, right? And so what does that say about his character and what he and his willingness to really be supportive and beneficial to the United States? If he'll blow up a deal that both sides said was a viable deal and had come to a agreement on, and then at the 11th hour he starts calling the MAGA folks up and says, no, kill that. So how serious is he about the immigrant issue if he's going to kill a bill that was approved on by both parties in order to maintain a talking point? Not for any other reason, but to maintain a talking point. And so we have to see this man for who he is, and not just as a form of entertainment, because entertainment can very quickly be detrimental in the wrong hands, y'all. So we gotta maintain some sanity around what this guy be saying, And so when it comes to immigration, it's very clear that he serves bigots and racists, and that became very clear when he was talking about the comments that he made that were clearly Haitian discrimination, right? And they were really sickly racist and egregious, the comments that he made that were geared specifically towards our Haitian community, right? And so thinking about how he's able to say that in a presidential debate, y'all, he said those ridiculous claims about Haitian immigrants in a presidential debate and stood on it, even when they came back and said, hey, no one's reported this, no one said this. He was like, well, it was on TV. I mean, come on. I can see how on the face that could be very comical, but it's also extremely sad, and it is backed by nothing more than bigotry and racism. And so if we feel that we are people who take stands against bigotry and racism, we can't allow his talking points about immigration when he's more than willing to kill a viable immigration bill for his own gain. We cannot take this man's stance on immigration seriously, right? And another dog whistle out there where the combination of bigotry and racism exists is this fallacy of a talking point that transgender immigrants are receiving are getting surgeries in prison, right? Like how much more of a compounded racist and bigoted statement can you get, right? It's like he sits there and like pulls out, how can I incite folks the most? Oh yeah, I know that we're having a lot of people have a lot of feelings around transgender folks and don't want them to have these surgeries, and I've done a good job of convincing people that immigrants are the only problem we have. And so let's combine the two and then create this scenario that's so ridiculous for us to just spew hate out of our mouths. Like, it's absolutely atrocious that you're going to say transgender immigrants are coming here for the sole purpose of going to prison so that they can get a sex change. That's ridiculous, y'all. Come on, that's ridiculous. That's just ridiculous on its face. Like, we can go on. That's unconscionable. You know what I mean? Like, but he's he's full of the caca. You know what I mean? What can we say? He's full of the caca. So, ain't no putting nothing past him. So that's just, I mean, when I think about that, y'all, when I think about that, I can't believe that he had the audacity to say what he said about Haitians and then to try to push this talking point about transgender immigrants as well. It's just a soup of prejudice. It's ridiculous. Um, and so when we talk about immigration and the difficulties that immigration poses, right? At the same breath, when we are disgruntled about being taxpayers who pay for immigrant care or immigrant housing and things of that nature, I wanna us to point our attention to how we pay as taxpayers day in and day out for the housing, for the care, for the food of the employees of corporate entities who don't pay a living wage. We subsidize those corporations, and we do so whether we know it or not. We subsidize those corporations because they don't want to pay their people enough money. And so, if we're going to be upset about covering care and housing for immigrants who are seeking safety, then I think we should be equally as upset about having to subsidize billion and trillion dollar corporations because they simply don't want to pay their employees enough and know that we, the taxpayers, will have to pick up that burden, right? And so if we're going to have this conversation, let's have it thoroughly, let's have it fully, and let's reduce costs from many angles, right? Not just from people who are struggling and in need, but from wealthy, overfunded corporations who get plenty of tax cuts already and then get subsidized by us, the taxpayer, right? And so when we're talking about how this works and these systems, that's one of the things of this system is that we are subsidizing way more than we are told about when it comes to corporate greed and corporations not paying their fair share, right? In any regard, whether it's employment, their employees, or their taxes, they are not providing for this country in the way that they should as entities operating in this country, and we have to subsidize them when they don't. And I think that is something that's deserving of way more of a conversation than what's being had, right? And so one of the other things that I wanted to talk about, because I know this is a very hot button issue, is Gaza, is the genocide happening over there, right? And I know that on both sides. Well, I don't want to. Let me back that up. I know that a lot of people are not in agreement with Kamala's stance, right, on Palestine. But I wanna make it very clear that Trump simply has no stance. And so when we talk to Kamala about it, we may not like what she says, but at least she seems to be movable in the sense that they're at the very least they want a two-state solution, whatever that means, because I don't, you put uh, that's a whole nother episode, I guess. But a two-state solution, and with Palestine having the right to self-determination, alongside Israel having the right to defend itself, which I completely don't agree with. Right, like you can't say that Israel has a right to defend itself when in practice the way that it is defending itself is by murdering and pillaging and raping and dissipating civilians. You can't have it both ways. if Israel does have the right to defend itself, then it should defend itself in military approved military fashion. Since it is not defending itself in that way, we should remove all access until they get back in line, right? Because right now Israel acts like they ain't got to answer to nobody. They can do what they want. They've killed the ceasefire talks time and time again. They don't care about their own hostages coming back home. They care about leveling all of Palestine and murdering as many civilian Palestinians as possible. And that is very clear through their actions, right? They're even going broke doing it, right? Like their economy is in shambles because they're putting so much of their money and the money that they are given from the United States and other countries towards this genocide that their own economy is lacking. And let's talk about colonialism, right? Let's talk about white supremacy for a second, because we know historically colonialism and white supremacy will do away with their own just to destroy what someone else has, right? We've seen that time and time again in these United States. You know, they will burn down and destroy their own things just to stop us or marginalized people from obtaining what they believe we should not have. And so we're seeing that happen in real time in Israel, right? Where they're willing to sacrifice their own well-being in order to dissipate women and children, you know, and have no regard for their own bringing home their own hostages. So again, when you can't take people seriously when they can't stand behind what they say, right? If Israel is so, needs this to defend itself so much, then maybe they should be more pliable and more willing to make a ceasefire deal in order to get their hostages home and create peace in that area so that they don't have to destabilize their own land. But, colonization says, F it, let's run this. You know what I'm saying? We don't care about our own people. We don't care about those people. We only care about murdering and dissipating as much as we can, as fast as we can, and we don't care who says we shouldn't do it. And the United States is in this position where, well, we see that that's their stance, but we stand by Israel, and so we're going to continue to aid in a genocide because we can't get Netanyahu to agree to terms. It's a little weak. It's real weak, actually. And the talking point is, oh, Israel has a right to defend itself. No, you actually just look really weak because you say in the same breath that they shouldn't be out here killing women and children and pillaging and dissipating civilians, but then you also want to say, well, they have the right to defend themselves. You almost sounding like your opponent when it comes to Israel. You know what I mean? Like, so that's a real sour point. But on the other side of that, Trump simply doesn't have a plan. All he talks about is how she hates Israel and she hates Muslims and the spheres of terror coming out of Iran and all of these things, but you never hear him articulate a plan to stop the genocide. And you know why? Because he won't stop the genocide. He doesn't care about stopping the genocide at all. He doesn't even care enough to give lip service to stopping the genocide. There's no attempt, no plan, no care from him in regards to the genocide happening in Palestine. And so if you're listening with a discerning ear, there's really, even in this instance, there should be a willingness to work with someone who may have the wrong outlook, but at least wants to achieve a similar goal than someone who clearly doesn't have a plan and doesn't care enough to formulate one. Who can we? And if we're making these choices, who can create the society and the ecosystem for alternative structures to thrive? And I tell you, it's not going to be Trump, right? It's going to be someone that we can actually speak to, who can actually make plans, who can actually listen to reason, that's going to make it more favorable Not saying that it ain't gonna be work on either side, right? Because in order to change systems, that takes righteous work, you know. But we can at least try to do the work with someone who may listen, who has a better opportunity to listen. With her small business background, cooperatives could come in with on that angle as small businesses set up in a cooperative fashion, and we have a means of conversation, right? We can have a means of conversation around Palestine. We can have a means of conversation around housing and increasing our housing stock, because this person, Kamala, has a plan, and the other person, Trump, does not, right? And so we have to do that. And another thing that I thought was funny is that Trump said in the debate that if he were voted in, if he were just made president elect, he would have the war, the war in Ukraine. He would end the war in Ukraine immediately. It would be ended before he even officially became president, right? And oftentimes I hear this narrative of towards Kamala of, well, you're already in office, why don't you do these things now, right? And Trump just said on the debate that he would stop the war in Ukraine even before he became president. And so my question is, why you don't do it now? Because Trump also said that he was going to get the hostages out. Remember that? And that he was the only one who was going to be able to get the hostages out. And I don't think a couple weeks went by before those hostages came home. So what is your buddy Putin really saying? You ain't got it like that. You ain't saucy like that, my guy. You don't nothing hinge on you. You couldn't do that, and you want to claim that you can end a war that you can't end, and you're gonna do it before you even walk into the White House again? No, no, you're not. You're lying. You know what I mean? And if you could, then why don't you show us and do it now? Do it now. But we all know he won't. We all know it's just jibber jabber and nonsense, essentially. You know what I'm saying? So if we're gonna talk about why don't people do things now, then let's have that same energy for both candidates. Because if Trump could come out his mouth and say he's going to do something that he's capable of doing before he becomes president, then why can't we say, then why don't you do it now? The same way we want to ask Kamala about these policies and why she doesn't implement them now when she's the vice president. But as the vice president, you literally have to get the president to do it, right? And we all know Biden. You know what I mean? We all know Biden. Biden don't want to do nothing for real. He's got his own agenda. Flighty Biden. You know what I'm saying? He's always a day late and a dollar short, ain't he? And so it's I know that might be a little strong for folks, but the truth of the matter is that Biden can go a lot further in protecting our country and our society here on USA soil than what he's done, in my opinion. And that's opened us up to these violations from the Supreme Court, right? The overturning of the Chevron doctrine, Roe v. Wade, immunity for presidents, right? Specifically geared to give immunity to Trump, so that if he were elected, he can come in day one and just he's about to be sentenced, right, for his crimes, because he was convicted. And if he gets into the presidency, he'll just undo all of that, right, for his own selfish needs, And so it's just really really disconcerting to me that is the case. You know what I mean? And we need to be keen on what this guy's real plans are, because he don't got no plans for you. He ain't about to help you. The economy is not about to be better under him. For us, for you as a small business owner, for us as citizens, that's not what's about to happen. And if you believe that he's about to make change for good for you, you're not paying attention, because he's clearly saying he's going to make change for others. He's got plans for the corporate greed machine. He's got plans for Wall Street to pillage. but he don't got plans to ease the burdens and difficulties that you and I are going through. He don't got those plans. And so, and he said it himself, right? When we're talking about healthcare in the debate and his opinions on the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, right? I thought it was a very damning question when they said, so just to verify, after 8 years, you don't have a plan. And his rebuttal was, I have concepts of a plan. Y'all, if y'all don't know BS when you hear it, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you, because when I tell you that ain't nothing but nonsense, and it's completely ridiculous to sit up here and say you have concepts of a plan when it comes to the Affordable Care Act and replacing it with something that could be beneficial for American citizens day in and day out. Because he doesn't. He wants to go in there. He wants to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, and he does not have a plan to replace it. So what he is saying is, I don't want you to have access to health care. That's what he's saying. I don't want you to have access to healthcare because the drug companies and the healthcare companies, they're paying way too much because they have to cover your preventative care. They have to cover your diseases and they can't have like these caps and all of that, right? And they can't deny you anymore because they don't want to pay. They can't do that anymore. And Trump is saying we got to get rid of it because it's too expensive. Who's it too expensive for? For the drug companies? It's too expensive for these healthcare companies that deny claims all the time? You know what I mean? Like, who he works for is not you and me. Okay? He don't work for us. And so if you're an American citizen that is not a corporate entity, if you don't at least identify as a bigot or a racist or a fundamentalist Christian, right? If these are not your readily claimed identities, he ain't got nothing for you. Okay? Trump don't got nothing for you unless you're someone on Wall Street or you're a part of the corporate greed machine. And so we have to be clear about what our options are and who's going to put us in the best position to create these systems that we need, right? To create alternative systems of care for our economics, for our own self-sustainability, right? Because for far too long we see that we're not getting what we need from both sides, but we have to make discerning decisions on who would be better for us when we're trying to build these systems. And for someone who doesn't have a plan for us, doesn't care about us, and is willing to derail deals to save self and not country, versus someone who we may not agree with on all points, but is at least pliable and able to be a listening ear, able to hear people out. You know, I think the decision is pretty clear, right? If we want an environment where we can build alternative structures that support us and our progeny, then we need to make the right decision in this election and vote for someone who has a plan for our progress, and then hold that person accountable, right? We can hold that person accountable to what they say, and if they don't perform, we can let it be readily known that we are not happy with their performance. But we can't expect somebody who don't got no plan for us and doesn't care about us and only cares for themselves to be someone that we can work with, you know? Because the work of systems change is going to need some type of cooperation. And at the very least, we might be able to get some headway with Kamala versus with Trump, you know? And so wrapping up today, I hope this was a decent breakdown of the debate and how it relates to us being able to create alternative systems and being discerning in who in these talking points and in these highlights, right, of what's being said, and being able to identify who one candidate works for and who the other candidate works for. And it's very clear that one candidate is at least has a plan for the American people, while the other one just has plans of self-grandizement. So it's a pretty clear decision to me. Let me know what you think in the comments. Reach out to us in the DMs. We'd be more than happy to continue the conversation. But I want to thank y'all for joining me on this third episode of the Herbal Apothecary podcast. Don't forget to try out some cloves in the next time you make some tea. And, be well. Thanks, y'all.